A paralyzed Chinese bride was starving until a wealthy rancher carried her into his heart. Li Mei was born in a small village in the southern part of China. Her home was modest, made of wood and clay, with a small courtyard where her mother grew vegetables and her father kept a few chickens. Life in the village was simple, but it was not easy. Every day, Li Mei helped her mother with chores, carrying water from the well, sweeping the floors, and cooking meals over a smoky stove. She often woke before the sun rose and worked until it disappeared behind the hills. Despite the hard work, she loved her family deeply and cherished the quiet beauty of her village. The mountains surrounding her home were tall and green. Rivers sparkled in the sunlight, and the fields were full of life. For a girl who dreamed of freedom, the village was both comforting and confining. From a young age, Li Mei had dreams beyond the small village. She wanted to study, to travel, and maybe one day find love. She spent hours reading borrowed books, imagining faraway cities and the people who lived there. She drew pictures of dresses she would wear at her wedding and wrote in a small notebook about the life she hoped to create for herself. But dreams were difficult when life was already a struggle. Her family's income barely covered food and basic necessities, and there was little hope for anything more.
One rainy afternoon when Li Mei was just 16, everything changed.
She had gone to help her mother collect water from the river, which had swollen from heavy rain. The ground was slippery, and while trying to carry 2 heavy buckets, she lost her balance and fell hard on a large rock. Pain shot through her back, and she could not move her legs. Her mother screamed and called for help from neighbors, but the nearest hospital was miles away. Li Mei was carried carefully on a makeshift stretcher, her tears mixing with the rain, her dreams fading with every step. The doctors confirmed the worst. Li Mei had suffered a spinal injury that left her paralyzed from the waist down. She would never walk again. The news hit her family like a storm. Her parents wept openly, feeling helpless and unsure how to care for their daughter. Her younger brother did not understand fully, but was scared too. Li Mei, however, did not cry. She simply looked out of the hospital window at the gray sky, trying to understand how her life could change so completely in one moment. Returning home was even harder than the accident. The house, which had been cramped and modest before, suddenly seemed suffocating. Li Mei could no longer move freely. She needed help to do even the simplest things: washing, eating, and using the bathroom. Her parents tried their best, but exhaustion quickly set in. They were poor, and now their daughter required constant attention and care. Sometimes there was not even enough food to fill her stomach. Li Mei, who had always been proud and independent, felt the weight of despair pressing down on her. She could not sleep at night, staring at the wooden ceiling, wondering if her dreams had died with her legs. The village offered sympathy, but little help. Some neighbors brought small gifts of food or blankets, but these gestures were temporary and could not solve the daily struggle. People whispered about Li Mei's situation. Some wondered how her parents would manage. Others said she would be a burden for life. Li Mei overheard these comments and felt the sting of isolation. She loved her village and the mountains she had grown up with, but now they felt like walls closing in around her. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Hunger became a constant companion. Sometimes there was rice for meals, but other times Li Mei went without. She watched as other children her age ran through the fields, laughing and carefree, while she remained trapped in her own body. Her friends visited less often. They did not know how to act around someone who could no longer walk. Loneliness became a heavy shadow, following her from room to room. She missed her old life, the freedom of running through the fields, the smell of flowers in the morning, and the simple joy of being able to move without thinking. But in the midst of all the hardship, Li Mei discovered small moments of hope. She found comfort in the rhythm of her days, in watching the sun rise and set, in listening to birds in the courtyard, and in the occasional laughter of her younger brother. She began to write more in her notebook, filling the pages with thoughts and dreams. Even though walking was impossible, she still imagined traveling, seeing cities, and one day finding someone who would love her for who she was, not for what she could do. Writing became her way of holding on to herself when the world seemed determined to take everything away. Her parents worked harder than ever to support her. Her mother spent hours cooking porridge that she could eat without help, and her father repaired the house to make it more accessible. Neighbors sometimes offered to carry her to the river or help her sit outside in the sun. Yet, no matter how hard they tried, there were moments when Li Mei felt invisible, trapped in a body that no longer obeyed her. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, fatigue weighed down her mind, and the emotional pain often felt heavier than the physical. Despite these struggles, Li Mei refused to give up entirely. She learned to smile again, even if only for a few minutes each day. She began to talk to herself about future possibilities, no matter how impossible they seemed. She imagined a life where someone would see beyond her paralysis and care for her heart. She believed that kindness still existed somewhere in the world. This belief, fragile as it was, became the thread that held her life together. The villagers began to notice the quiet strength in her. Even though she could not walk, Li Mei had a resilience that inspired those around her. Children would come to hear her stories, curious about her drawings and books. Women in the village would sometimes sit with her, sharing recipes or sewing small items. While she was isolated in her body, her mind and heart were free to reach out to others. Little by little, she became a symbol of perseverance, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, a person could find small lights of hope. As months turned into a year, Li Mei faced a crucial question. Would she let her life be defined by paralysis and hunger, or could she continue to dream and survive? Each day presented new challenges: finding enough food, managing her hygiene, coping with loneliness, but she decided, quietly and stubbornly, that she would survive.
She began to imagine a new life, one that did not yet exist, but might someday.
She allowed herself to hope that there was someone in the world who could see her, truly see her, and not just her condition. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Li Mei sat by her window and watched the world outside. The breeze touched her face and she breathed deeply, feeling a flicker of peace. She whispered to herself, "I will live. I will not let this break me." In that moment, the pain of her body was still present, but it was no longer the whole of her existence. Something in her heart had shifted. Even in her small, quiet room, surrounded by struggle, she began to feel the faint stirrings of hope, a feeling that would eventually lead her to a life she could not yet imagine. Li Mei's story, though filled with hardship, was far from over. The accident had changed her life, but it had not destroyed her spirit. Her days were difficult, her nights long, and her hunger real. But her mind was alive with dreams, and her heart open to possibilities. Somewhere beyond the mountains, beyond the poverty and the whispers of the villagers, a new chapter was waiting for her. A chapter that might bring someone into her life who could see her worth, her courage, and her strength. And in that quiet determination, Li Mei began the first step of a journey that would change her life forever. Li Mei's life continued in the quiet rhythm of her small village. Each day brought its own challenges, yet her determination never wavered. She had learned to survive, but she still longed for something more, a connection, a chance to escape the smallness of her world and someone to care for her heart as much as her body needed care. Far away across the ocean lived Daniel Hartman, a wealthy rancher in Texas. Daniel had spent most of his life managing his large ranch, which spread across hundreds of acres of open land. The ranch was beautiful, with wide fields, tall trees, and herds of cattle that grazed peacefully under the sun. But despite the wealth and freedom his land offered, Daniel's heart carried its own burdens. He had been married once, but the marriage ended painfully. The heartbreak left him lonely, and he spent years focusing solely on his work, managing his ranch and keeping busy to avoid the emptiness he felt inside. One day, Daniel felt the desire to do something different, something meaningful beyond the borders of his ranch. He had always been interested in helping people in need, and when a charitable organization invited him to visit small villages in China, he agreed. He did not expect much, only hoping to contribute in some small way. He packed his bags, leaving behind the wide fields of his home, and traveled across the ocean to a land he had only imagined in pictures and books. The first days in the village were overwhelming for Daniel. The streets were narrow and busy, filled with people selling fruits, vegetables, and handmade goods. Children ran through the alleys laughing, and the air was filled with the scents of cooking food, flowers, and the earthy smell after rain. Everything was new, vibrant, and alive. Daniel had never felt such a mixture of wonder and humility. He realized that life in this village was far simpler than on his ranch, but the people worked with a strength and resilience he admired. It was during one of his visits to a local community center that Daniel first saw Lee May. She sat quietly in a corner, her hands folded in her lap, eyes focused on a small notebook. Her face was calm but held a sadness that immediately caught his attention. There was something in the way she carried herself, despite her paralysis, that spoke of strength and dignity. He approached slowly, careful not to startle her. "Hello," he said in English, hoping someone would translate. A young volunteer quickly translated, introducing Daniel to Lee May. She looked at him with curiosity and caution. Most strangers avoided her, uncomfortable with her condition. But Daniel did not look at her with pity. He looked at her as a person, a human being, with a story worth knowing. They began to talk, slowly at first, using translators and gestures, but soon their conversations became more natural. Daniel learned about her family, her accident, and the struggles she faced every day. He listened without judgment, offering no false promises, only genuine attention. Lee May, who had grown used to being invisible to strangers, felt a strange comfort in Daniel's presence. For the first time in months, she laughed. She shared small stories about her childhood, the games she played with her brother, and her dreams of seeing the world. Daniel listened, genuinely interested, and in those conversations, Lee May felt a spark of hope. Here was someone who did not see her as broken or helpless, but as a person with thoughts, feelings, and dreams. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel continued to visit. Each visit he brought small gifts, food that Lee May enjoyed, books she could read, and even art supplies so she could continue drawing. At first, these gifts were simple, almost symbolic, but over time they became more than objects. They were signs that someone cared, that someone saw her struggles and wanted to make a difference. Lee May began to look forward to Daniel's visits, counting the days and imagining the stories he might tell her next. As they spent more time together, their connection deepened. Daniel admired her resilience, how she faced each day despite the challenges. Lee May admired his kindness, the way he treated her with respect and patience. Though language was sometimes a barrier, their gestures, smiles, and shared laughter spoke volumes. They discovered common interests, such as a love for nature, a curiosity about the world, and a desire to help others. Slowly, a bond formed between them, quiet at first, but powerful in its sincerity. The villagers noticed the change in Li Mei. She was smiling more, speaking with more confidence, and showing a renewed interest in life. They saw Daniel helping her with simple tasks, carrying her to places she could not reach on her own, and treating her as an equal. Whispers of admiration spread through the village. Some were surprised that someone like Daniel, a wealthy foreigner, would take such an interest in a girl with so many challenges. Others simply felt happy for Li Mei, seeing her finally receive care and attention she deserved. Despite the growing bond, there were challenges. Daniel could not stay in the village forever, and Li Mei sometimes felt a wave of fear. What if he left, and her life returned to loneliness? But Daniel, sensing her anxiety, made it clear that he intended to help in a meaningful way, not as a fleeting visitor, but as someone committed to making a difference. He began to explore ways to improve her life permanently, considering options that no one else had thought possible. One afternoon, Daniel and Li Mei went to the village market together. Daniel carried her in a specially designed wheelchair, allowing her to see the bustling streets and interact with vendors. Li Mei laughed for the first time in months, her voice bright and full of joy. She pointed to fruits she liked, commented on the colors of fabrics, and asked questions about the people passing by. Daniel followed her lead, encouraging her to engage with the world around her. It was a small but profound step. For Li Mei, it was the first time she felt alive beyond her room, her house, or the shadow of her accident. Their relationship was not without its critics. Some villagers whispered that a wealthy man could not truly understand the life of a girl paralyzed in poverty. Others wondered if his intentions were pure. But Daniel and Li Mei ignored these murmurs. They focused on trust, understanding, and care. Slowly, the skepticism faded, replaced by admiration. People began to see that their connection was built on respect and genuine concern, not pity or obligation. Through the weeks and months, Daniel worked quietly behind the scenes. He arranged for better medical care for Li Mei, ensuring she had proper nutrition, physiotherapy, and supplies to improve her daily life. He educated himself about her needs, researching how to make her environment more comfortable. Each gesture, no matter how small, reinforced his commitment. Li Mei noticed this, and her gratitude and affection grew. She began to dream again, imagining a future where she could live with dignity, not merely survive. One evening, as the sun set over the village, Daniel and Li Mei sat together in the small courtyard outside her home. The air was warm, filled with the scent of flowers and freshly cooked food. They spoke softly, sharing hopes, dreams, and fears. Li Mei realized that she was beginning to trust him completely, something she had not done with anyone since her accident. Daniel, in turn, felt a connection deeper than he had expected. He admired her courage, her intelligence, and the strength of her spirit. In that quiet moment, both understood that their bond was something rare and special. Daniel's visits became the highlight of Li Mei's days. Even when he could not be there, she would write letters to him, drawing pictures and describing her day. She began to see that kindness and love could exist even in the most unlikely places. Her world, once small and constrained, was slowly opening to possibilities she had never imagined. And Daniel, seeing her resilience and courage, found himself inspired in ways he had never experienced before. By the end of the first year of their acquaintance, their lives had changed in profound ways. Li Mei was no longer the lonely girl trapped by her paralysis and poverty. She had a companion, a friend, and someone who believed in her. Daniel had discovered a purpose beyond his ranch, beyond wealth, and beyond personal success. He realized that helping Li Mei was not charity. It was a gift of the heart, a connection that enriched both their lives. And though challenges remained, distance, language, and the realities of her condition, the foundation of trust and affection had been laid. Li Mei's heart, once heavy with despair, now held a light of hope. She began to imagine a future where she could experience joy, care, and love again. Daniel, whose life had been lonely and focused on work, began to understand that wealth meant little without someone to share life with. Their story at this stage was one of quiet transformation. Li Mei, the girl who had once stared out of her window in loneliness, now looked forward to each day. She was learning that even the darkest moments could be softened by care, attention, and genuine friendship. And Daniel, the man who had crossed oceans seeking purpose, found that true connection often came from unexpected places, and that sometimes helping one person could change two lives forever. Time passed, and the bond between Li Mei and Daniel grew stronger. What had started as simple visits and acts of kindness had evolved into something deeper, though neither of them said it out loud. They were careful, cautious even, because the world around them was watching, and their connection felt fragile, yet powerful. Li Mei began to open up more about her life. She shared stories from her childhood, how she had once climbed the small hills near her village to watch the sunrise, how she had helped her mother plant vegetables, and the games she had played with her younger brother. She spoke about her dreams, too, of seeing cities she had only read about, of feeling the world beyond the mountains, and of finding someone who could love her, not for what she could do, but for who she was. Daniel listened intently, captivated by her words. He admired her courage and the way she spoke with honesty and clarity. Unlike many people he had met in life, Li Mei did not pretend to be stronger than she was, nor did she hide her fears. She was real, and Daniel found that refreshing. He had spent so many years focused on work, on appearances, and on maintaining a reputation, that encountering someone so genuine touched him deeply. As their friendship developed, Daniel began to notice the small details about Li Mei. The way her eyes lit up when she spoke about something she loved, the careful way she held her pen when drawing, and the subtle smiles that appeared when she felt safe and understood. These details drew him closer, not just as a visitor helping someone in need, but as a man beginning to care deeply for another human being. Li Mei, too, felt something shift in her heart. At first, she had been wary. She had learned to expect disappointment, to be cautious with trust. But Daniel was patient. He did not pressure her, did not demand anything from her. He simply showed up, consistently, with kindness and attention. In a world that had often treated her as fragile or invisible, Daniel's steady care was revolutionary. Slowly, she began to imagine a life where she was not alone, where someone could truly see her and accept her. There were moments of laughter that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. Daniel would tell stories of life on his ranch, of cows that refused to be milked, of storms that had blown fences down, and of nights under endless stars. Li Mei would giggle at his stories, asking questions and imagining herself in a place so far from her village. In these moments, the walls that had confined her heart began to crumble. She realized that even though she could not walk, she could still experience joy, still feel excitement, and still connect deeply with another person. But their growing closeness was not without challenges. Communication was sometimes difficult. Daniel spoke English, Li Mei spoke Chinese, and though translators helped, nuances were often lost. Misunderstandings happened, small frustrations arose, and both had to learn patience. There were moments when Li Mei felt frustrated with herself, wishing she could express herself fully, and moments when Daniel felt helpless, unable to convey exactly what he wanted to say. Yet each difficulty they overcame only strengthened their bond. Cultural differences also played a role. Daniel had lived a life of comfort and independence, while Li Mei had grown up in a modest village where survival often meant accepting hardship. Daniel had to learn how to help without making her feel dependent, and Lee May had to learn how to trust someone from a completely different world. They both adapted, slowly building a shared understanding that transcended words. In doing so, they discovered that love and care are not about similarity, but about respect and attention. One afternoon, Daniel arranged a special day for Lee May. He had prepared a small garden near the community center where she spent her mornings. The garden was full of flowers she loved, and there were comfortable chairs placed so she could enjoy the view. When Lee May arrived and saw the garden, her eyes widened. She could not believe someone would think of her in such a thoughtful way. She reached out, touching the petals, laughing softly, and looking at Daniel with a mixture of surprise and gratitude.
"This is beautiful,"
she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've never had anything like this before." Daniel smiled. "You deserve it," he said simply. "You deserve to be happy, to have beauty around you, and to know that someone cares." Lee May felt tears prick her eyes. She was overwhelmed, not by the flowers themselves, but by the realization that someone had gone out of their way, not for recognition, not for obligation, but simply for her. In that moment, she felt seen in a way she had never felt before. Their relationship deepened with small, meaningful gestures. Daniel would help her reach books on high shelves, feed her favorite snacks, or read aloud from stories she enjoyed. Lee May in turn would draw pictures for him, write small notes, and smile in ways that communicated gratitude beyond words. Their interactions were simple, quiet, but profoundly intimate. Through these daily acts, trust grew into affection, and affection began to feel like love. Yet the turning point came when Daniel faced a difficult decision. He knew he could not stay in the village indefinitely. His work on the ranch required attention, and he had responsibilities that could not be ignored. At the same time, he could not leave Lee May behind in the conditions she lived in. The thought of her returning to hunger, loneliness, and isolation was unbearable. Daniel realized that if he truly cared for her, he had to act. He had to find a way to bring her into his life permanently, to ensure her safety, comfort, and happiness. When he shared this with Lee May, she was both excited and frightened. The idea of leaving her village, her family, and the only life she had known was overwhelming. She was afraid of the unknown, afraid of moving to a foreign country, and afraid that she would be helpless in a new world. But Daniel's presence was reassuring. He promised to guide her, to support her, and to make the transition as smooth as possible. His commitment gave her courage. For the first time in years, Lee May felt that change could be something positive, something that could bring hope rather than fear. The villagers watched the preparation for this change with curiosity. Some were skeptical, unsure if such a plan could work. Others were supportive, recognizing that Lee May had endured too much suffering and deserved every opportunity for a better life. The community center volunteers helped with arrangements, ensuring that Lee May had medical care, transportation, and support during the journey. Daniel coordinated everything meticulously, driven by a combination of love and responsibility. As the day of departure approached, Lee May experienced a whirlwind of emotions. Excitement mingled with anxiety, gratitude mixed with fear, and hope fought against doubt. She knew that she was about to step into a life entirely different from the one she had always known. Yet she also realized that she would not face this change alone. Daniel had become her anchor, her protector, and the person who believed in her when the world had not. On the morning of her journey, Daniel arrived at her home with a specially equipped wheelchair and a gentle smile. Lee May's parents were tearful, proud, and anxious all at once. They thanked Daniel repeatedly, knowing that he was giving their daughter an opportunity they could never provide themselves. Li Mei hugged her family tightly, promising to stay connected before turning to Daniel with both hope and nervous anticipation. As they traveled together, Li Mei could feel the weight of her past lifting slightly. The mountains of her village faded into the distance, replaced by unfamiliar landscapes, skies, and horizons. She was moving toward something unknown, yet for the first time she felt a sense of possibility. Daniel's presence beside her made the unknown less frightening. He spoke gently, reassuring her with words, gestures, and steady attention, reminding her that she was not alone. During the journey, Li Mei reflected on the past year, the accident, the hunger, the struggle, and the moments of despair. She realized how far she had come. Despite everything, she had survived, grown stronger, and now had a chance to experience something new. Her heart, once heavy with fear and sorrow, now held a quiet excitement, a fragile but growing hope that life could be beautiful again. When they finally arrived at Daniel's ranch, Li Mei was amazed. The wide fields stretched farther than her eyes could see. The sun shone warmly, and the air smelled fresh and clean. Everything was different, yet there was a calmness that welcomed her. Daniel guided her carefully into the house, showing her each room, making adjustments for her comfort, and explaining how she could move around safely. For the first time, Li Mei felt that she could belong somewhere outside of her past suffering. That night, as she looked out at the endless fields under the stars, Li Mei realized that her life had changed forever. She was still paralyzed, still dependent on help for many things, but she no longer felt trapped. She had someone by her side who cared for her completely, someone who saw her as a person of value, strength, and beauty. And in that moment she understood that love could arrive unexpectedly, in quiet gestures, patient attention, and unwavering commitment. Li Mei's first days on the ranch were a whirlwind of emotions. The vastness of the land, the unfamiliar sounds of animals, and the endless sky were overwhelming. For someone who had spent most of her life in a small village, everything was new, exciting, confusing, and sometimes frightening. She felt a mixture of awe and anxiety. She was far from home, but she had Daniel by her side, guiding her through each step, making her feel safe even in this unfamiliar world. Daniel had prepared carefully for her arrival. The house was adapted to suit her needs, with ramps, wider doorways, and a comfortable room that allowed her to move freely in her wheelchair. Every detail, from the placement of her books to the height of the tables, was arranged with thoughtfulness. Yet, despite all the planning, Li Mei still faced challenges. Simple tasks that had once been easy, like reaching a cup or opening a door, required adjustments and patience. But Daniel never made her feel incapable. He encouraged her, assisted when necessary, and celebrated each small victory with her. The animals on the ranch fascinated Li Mei. Cows, horses, chickens, and even the occasional curious goat seemed to welcome her presence. Daniel introduced her gently, teaching her how to interact safely. At first, she could only watch, unable to join in the physical work, but Daniel found ways for her to participate. She began feeding the smaller animals, arranging their food, and even learning how to groom a horse from her wheelchair. Each accomplishment, however small, brought a sense of pride and independence she had not felt in years. Despite the excitement of the new environment, there were moments of struggle. Li Mei felt homesick, missing her family, the familiar streets of her village, and the mountains she had grown up with. Sometimes the loneliness pressed on her heart, especially at night when the vast ranch felt quiet and empty. She worried about whether she could truly adapt to this new life, whether she would ever feel at home so far from everything familiar. But Daniel's presence was a constant reassurance. He was patient and attentive, knowing that her fears were real and validating them with gentle words and careful support. Over time, Lee May began to explore the ranch more confidently. Daniel taught her to navigate the wide fields, pointing out paths that were safe and accessible. They would spend hours outside together, enjoying the beauty of the land, the rolling hills, the sparkling streams, and the endless skies. Lee May often reached out to touch the grass, feel the wind on her face, and listen to the sounds of nature. Each experience reminded her that life could still hold wonder, even when her body was limited. One afternoon, Daniel arranged a picnic near a small pond on the ranch. He carefully lifted Lee May from her wheelchair and settled her on a specially prepared blanket. The sun was warm, birds chirped nearby, and the water reflected the sky like a mirror. They shared a simple meal, laughing and talking about their hopes, fears, and dreams. Lee May realized how much she had missed these moments of connection and joy. The simple act of sharing food, surrounded by beauty, made her feel alive in a way she had not felt in years. Their days together became a mix of routine and adventure. Daniel encouraged Lee May to pursue her interests. She continued to draw and write, documenting her experiences on the ranch. Sometimes she painted the fields, the animals, and the sunsets, capturing the beauty she saw with a fresh perspective. Daniel admired her talent and often displayed her artwork around the house, celebrating her creativity. These small gestures reinforced her confidence and reminded her that she was valued not only for her courage, but also for her spirit and talents. However, the journey was not without obstacles. Lee May's body required careful care, and she occasionally experienced pain or fatigue. Daniel was always attentive, helping her with exercises, adjusting her position, and ensuring she received proper medical attention. There were moments when she felt frustrated, wishing she could do more on her own. But Daniel reminded her that strength also comes from accepting help and trusting others. Slowly, she learned to embrace this balance between independence and support. The emotional closeness between Daniel and Lee May grew stronger during this time. They shared quiet moments under the stars, talking about their pasts, their fears, and their dreams for the future. Lee May learned about Daniel's struggles with loneliness, his past heartbreak, and his desire to find meaning beyond wealth and work. Daniel, in turn, learned about Lee May's resilience, her love for life despite hardships, and her hope for a better future. These conversations deepened their bond, turning admiration and trust into a profound emotional connection. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Daniel and Lee May sat together on a porch swing. Lee May rested her head on Daniel's shoulder, feeling a warmth she had never known. "I was so afraid at first," she admitted softly. "I didn't know if I could live here, if I could belong somewhere so different from home." Daniel held her gently.
You belong wherever you feel safe, loved, and valued.
"And I want you to feel that here, with me. You are not alone anymore." Tears filled Lee May's eyes, but they were tears of relief and gratitude. She realized that her life had transformed in ways she had never imagined. The ranch, the animals, the wide-open fields, they were beautiful, but it was the care, attention, and love of Daniel that made her feel truly alive. For the first time since her accident, she felt a sense of belonging and hope for the future. As the weeks turned into months, Lee May became an integral part of life on the ranch. She found joy in small routines, feeding the chickens each morning, helping in the vegetable garden, and observing the animals with Daniel. She developed relationships with the ranch staff, who admired her courage and welcomed her as part of their community. Though she could not perform physical tasks like riding a horse or mending fences, her presence brought warmth and inspiration to everyone around her. One day, Daniel organized a small celebration for Lee May. He invited friends, neighbors, and staff from the ranch, creating an afternoon full of laughter, music, and food. Lee May felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. She had never experienced anything like this before, being celebrated, appreciated, and surrounded by people who cared. Daniel watched her carefully, ensuring she felt comfortable and included, and seeing her smile radiate with joy filled his heart with satisfaction. During the celebration, Lee May spoke quietly to Daniel. "I never thought I could feel this happy again," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I was so scared of life after my accident, but now I feel like I have a chance to live fully." Daniel smiled, taking her hand gently. "You have always been strong, Lee May. You just needed someone to see that strength, to help you use it in a world that sometimes feels too big. And I promise I will always be here with you." That moment marked a turning point in their relationship. The bond they had nurtured through patience, care, and shared experiences had blossomed into a love that was quiet, steady, and unshakable. It was not a love born of sudden passion or fleeting romance. It was a love built on trust, understanding, and shared humanity. Lee May felt valued, respected, and deeply cared for, and Daniel felt the joy of being truly connected to another person in a way he had never experienced. Yet, life on the ranch was not without its challenges. Weather storms, unexpected illnesses among animals, and occasional logistical difficulties reminded them that life was never perfect. Lee May sometimes struggled with her mobility and independence, and Daniel faced moments of worry about whether he was doing enough. But they faced these challenges together. Each obstacle became an opportunity to strengthen their connection, to learn patience, and to reaffirm their commitment to one another. Through it all, Lee May discovered a profound truth. Even in the face of physical limitations and past hardships, life could be rich, meaningful, and full of joy. Daniel taught her that love is not just an emotion, but an action, expressed through care, patience, and presence. She realized that her heart, once weighed down by fear and loneliness, could expand again to embrace happiness, trust, and hope. By the end of her first year on the ranch, Lee May had transformed. She moved with confidence in her wheelchair, engaged fully in daily life, and radiated a joy that touched everyone around her. Daniel watched her growth with pride and admiration, knowing that their journey together had been one of mutual transformation. He had helped her, yes, but she had also shown him the beauty of resilience, the power of hope, and the depth of human connection. Lee May's life, once confined to a small village and defined by hardship, had expanded into a world of possibilities. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and change, yet emerged stronger, wiser, and full of hope. And through it all she had discovered love, not the kind she had read about in books or dreamed of in stories, but a real, steady, and sustaining love built on trust, care, and shared experience. Life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm, but it was far from ordinary. For Lee May, each day was an opportunity to discover more about herself, her surroundings, and the depth of care that Daniel offered. She had grown confident in her mobility with her wheelchair, learned to participate in tasks around the ranch, and developed a sense of purpose she had never known before. No longer defined by her paralysis or her past hardships, she was becoming a woman who could live fully, even within her limitations. Daniel continued to support her, but he also encouraged independence. He understood that true care was not just about helping someone physically, but about empowering them emotionally and mentally. He taught her to make decisions about the ranch, from planning meals for the staff to organizing small events for visitors. Li Mei discovered a talent for leadership she had never recognized in herself. She began to enjoy guiding and helping others, feeling the pride that came from being useful and respected. The relationship between Daniel and Li Mei matured gracefully. Their love was steady, built on shared experiences, trust, and mutual admiration. They did not need grand gestures to prove their feelings. A simple touch, a shared smile, or a quiet conversation under the stars spoke volumes. Daniel often said, "I don't need to do anything extraordinary for you. Being here with you, seeing you grow, is enough for me." And Li Mei felt the same. The connection between them was a calm, enduring force, not flashy or dramatic, but profoundly real. Li Mei also found joy in small routines that had become meaningful. She loved tending to the garden, watching the animals, and preparing meals for the ranch hands. She discovered a deep satisfaction in simple tasks and learned to take pride in her contributions. Each day she grew stronger, emotionally, realizing that her life could be full of beauty, purpose, and connection, even if it was different from what she had once imagined. Visitors to the ranch noticed the transformation in Li Mei. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers who came for tours or charity events were struck by her confidence, warmth, and intelligence. They saw a woman who had endured tremendous hardship, yet radiated hope and joy. Daniel watched her interactions with pride, knowing that he had played a role in her growth, but also understanding that her resilience and spirit were entirely her own. She had become an inspiration not only to him, but to everyone around her. Despite the joy and progress, life was not without challenges. There were still days when Li Mei felt fatigue, discomfort, or emotional strain. She sometimes missed her family in China and worried about how they were doing. Daniel always reminded her that these feelings were natural, that longing and struggle were part of life, and that acknowledging them made her stronger, not weaker. Together, they developed strategies to manage difficult days, from quiet walks to creative activities, ensuring that Li Mei felt supported without being overprotected. One of the most significant moments in Li Mei's journey was when she began reaching out to help others. Inspired by Daniel's generosity and the kindness she had experienced, she decided to assist children and adults with disabilities in nearby communities. She wrote letters, made small drawings, and even taught basic skills to others who faced challenges similar to hers. Each act of service gave her a renewed sense of purpose. She realized that while Daniel had carried her into a new life, she could now carry hope to others. The feeling of giving back filled her with joy and strengthened her sense of self-worth. Daniel observed these changes with deep admiration. He saw a transformation that went beyond physical comfort or emotional support. Li Mei had developed confidence, compassion, and resilience that inspired him daily. He often said quietly to himself, "She has given me more than I could ever give her. Her courage, her heart, her spirit, it's a gift I can't describe." Their love, he realized, was not just romantic. It was a partnership in growth, a union that elevated both of their lives. As the seasons changed, the ranch flourished under their shared attention. The gardens bloomed, the animals thrived, and the home was filled with laughter, warmth, and creativity. Li Mei continued her drawings, capturing scenes of life on the ranch, the animals, the sunsets, the wide-open fields, and often gave them as gifts to friends and staff. Each piece was a reflection of her journey from fear and isolation to confidence and joy. Through her art, she expressed gratitude, hope, and beauty, touching everyone who saw it. Their relationship, though deeply loving, remained grounded in reality. Daniel understood the importance of balance, allowing Li Mei to explore, learn, and grow independently while offering care and support when necessary. Li Mei understood that love did not mean losing herself or relying solely on someone else. It meant sharing life, challenges, and happiness in equal measure. This understanding made their bond stronger, more resilient, and lasting. One quiet evening, Lee May and Daniel sat together on a hill overlooking the ranch. The sky was painted with shades of orange, pink, and purple as the sun set. Lee May took a deep breath, feeling the wind on her face, and turned to Daniel. "I never imagined life could be this full," she said softly. "I was so afraid after my accident, but now I feel like I have everything I need." Daniel smiled, holding her hand gently. "You've always had everything inside you," he replied. "I just helped you see it, your courage, your heart, your mind. They are incredible. And I'm grateful every day that I get to be here with you." Lee May felt a warmth in her chest that went beyond words. She realized that happiness was not about forgetting the past, nor was it about having everything perfectly. Happiness was about connection, love, and the ability to grow despite challenges. With Daniel by her side, she felt safe to embrace life fully, to dream again, and to experience joy she had never thought possible. Over time, Lee May also reconnected with her family in China. Through letters, phone calls, and visits, she shared her new life, her accomplishments, and her happiness. Her family rejoiced, proud of her resilience and the life she had built. They were grateful to Daniel for his unwavering care, but they also recognized that Lee May's courage and spirit had carried her forward. These connections strengthened her sense of belonging and reminded her that love could span distances and circumstances. Lee May and Daniel also began planning small projects to help others. They organized community events for people with disabilities, shared resources with nearby villages, and created programs to support education and well-being. These projects brought them closer together and allowed Lee May to use her experiences to inspire and uplift others. She had moved from a place of need to a position of influence, showing that even those who have faced great hardship can create positive change. Through these experiences, Lee May realized that life was not about perfection or absence of struggle. It was about resilience, courage, and the willingness to accept help while giving back. She had once been a girl paralyzed and hungry, uncertain if life had more to offer. Now she was a woman with a purpose, surrounded by love, and capable of inspiring others. Daniel had carried her into a new life, but she had taken that opportunity and made it her own. As the years passed, their bond continued to grow. Daniel and Lee May shared quiet mornings, bustling afternoons, and peaceful evenings together. They celebrated milestones, comforted each other during difficult moments, and found joy in the ordinary and extraordinary alike. The love between them was steady, patient, and enduring, a testament to the power of care, trust, and genuine connection. Lee May often reflected on her journey. She remembered the days of isolation, hunger, and fear. She remembered staring out of her window in her village, wondering if anyone could ever care for her fully. And now, sitting on the porch of the ranch, watching the sunset with Daniel, she realized how far she had come. Her heart was full, her mind sharp, and her spirit alive. Life had given her a second chance, and she had embraced it with courage and gratitude. Daniel, too, reflected on their journey. He had come to China seeking to help, never imagining that he would find a connection so deep and transformative. Through Lee May, he had learned patience, humility, and the true meaning of love. He realized that wealth and comfort were meaningless without someone to share life with, and that the greatest gift was the ability to support, care, and grow alongside another person. Their story became known beyond the ranch. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers who heard of their journey were inspired. They saw that love could cross boundaries of culture, language, and circumstance. They saw that hardship did not define a person, and that courage, kindness, and connection could transform lives. Lee May and Daniel's story was no longer just about survival. It was about hope, resilience, and the power of human compassion. In the quiet moments, Lee May would often look at Daniel and smile. She knew that her life had been changed forever, not just by his care, but by the love, patience, and belief he had shown her. She had gone from being a girl trapped by circumstances to a woman who could live fully, love deeply, and inspire others. And Daniel, looking at her, felt the same profound gratitude. Together, they had built a life that was meaningful, joyful, and filled with hope. As the sun set each day over the ranch, Lee May felt a peace she had never known. She had been carried through hardship, lifted by kindness, and nurtured by love. And now, with Daniel by her side, she could finally live the life she had dreamed of, full of beauty, connection, and endless possibilities. Her journey from despair to hope was complete, but it was also a beginning. She had learned that love, courage, and resilience could carry a person through the darkest times. And with Daniel, she knew that life would continue to be an adventure, a story of care, growth, and unwavering devotion. Together, they had created a world where challenges could be faced, dreams could be pursued, and hearts could be full. Lee May, the girl who had once been paralyzed and hungry, was no longer defined by her past. She had been carried into a life of hope, love, and purpose, and she had embraced it fully. And in doing so, she had shown that even the most difficult journeys can lead to the most beautiful destinations.